We live in a world that is full of noise. There's hardly a silent moment anymore. But more than that, we live in a world in which there is a tremendous amount of man-made unnecessary noise. One of the most common forms of this is small talk that leads to nothing. Arguments, dissensions, hatreds, and various accusations that are unfair or unreasonable. Somewhere along the line, the person who wishes to know himself must be able to sit down and become acquainted with himself. To each of us, ourselves remains always the unknown person. We spend very little time trying to understand our own motives. We simply fulfill the pressures. If we don't feel good, we let our bad feelings show. If we're angry, we explode in somebody's face. Nothing is really given any serious consideration under such pressures. So each person, beginning in childhood, should recognize the dignity and importance of quietude. The individual should be able to sit down and simply relax and think. Think without pressure. Think without intensity. Think in fields and areas which are comforting to the mind. Remember the better things of life and gradually discipline an appreciation for the benefits we have enjoyed, and also the gradual integration of patterns to contribute to the happiness and security of other people. A quiet, meditative relationship, a relationship in which peace of mind is the result of relaxing away from the stupidities with which we have become dominated. Everyone should be able to be quiet. It should not be necessary for the person who is not up to his neck in activity to sit back and simply fidget. There is no peace of mind where the individual cannot settle down quietly to contemplate or think or enjoy the benefits of his own spiritual experience and life. It is also through the quietude that we have to approach heaven. For whatever religion we may hold, whatever faith is important to us, we come closest to realities in quietude. And when we get nervous and upset and the blood pressure rises, quietude will bring it down again. Quietude also brings with it patience. The quiet person does not necessarily carry a chip on his shoulder. The quiet person is able to estimate more correctly the attitudes of others. It is much less likely we will misunderstand people if we listen quietly to their words or watch quietly their actions. Very often misunderstanding is simply within ourselves. A prejudice has taken over and we spit back at someone. All these things create sickness. All of these things destroy the benefits of life. Now, with many people, there are two very important emergencies in life which have to be considered. One is the emergency that arises when children leave home. There is always that day when a busy life, made largely busy by the responsibilities of parenthood, this suddenly ceases to be an emergency or a dedication. The birds have flown. The individual suddenly finds a very serious vacuum. He has no longer the responsibilities, the anxieties and worries of parenthood. There is suddenly an empty nest and people who are unable to face it. They do not know what to do with themselves. And very often the untrained, undisciplined mind has a tendency to sit back and contemplate its own deprivations. Very often it will contemplate why the children shouldn't have married the persons they did marry, or why have they not continued to write home every day, And why do we only hear from them when they want some money? Why are all these things suddenly brought to our attention, bringing about a feeling that we were never appreciated, that we have been left alone, we have given everything and gotten nothing, and on and on and on and on, until we can dissolve in a noble example of self-pity and go on sedations as the only remedy. Now, lots of people do this. They just cannot face the fact of life as it really is. They cannot say with cheerfulness, I have finished a responsibility and now my life is my own. The reason they do not want a life of their own is because they never had one. They do not realize that maturity implies the need for a personal existence. That things that perhaps were not possible due to the responsibilities of family had to be passed over. But now at middle life, it is possible to pick up all these threads and do interesting and important things. But if the mind simply will not rise to this occasion, then there are all kinds of false activities created, and we never fool ourselves with time-killing diversions. Unless we are really doing something worthwhile, we know it. And at that time, it is very necessary to think seriously of starting a second career or carrying on an early one. If at this time we have some leisure, some freedom from responsibilities, it may be that we should advance our education. But we should certainly do something that is intense enough to get our minds away from ourselves, so that we are no longer neglected parents, but are now adventurers going out in a pattern of personal accomplishments. A number of persons have made wonderful lives by simply picking up important threads when the responsibilities of the family these responsibilities were lightened. Also, do not transfer all of this wasted energy and time on grandchildren. Do not spoil the grandchildren. Do not try to fill in by taking over their lives. Think always in a term of a life of your own. This means that sometimes you may be very helpful to the grandchildren, but do not let them take the place of children as a center of interest and an excuse why you should not do any thinking of your own. Now, the second emergency that comes along is the emergency of retirement. This is sometimes one of the most difficult of all, and probably the difficulty is very largely to be faced by the wife. The man is suddenly home all the time, and it was bad enough when he was home at weekends. Now he is nervous, unsettled, and does not know what to do. He does not know why he is suddenly deprived of all of the original incentives of life, because in the course of his business career, he practically forgot or neglected his own personal survival. He was part of a machine of some kind, and when the machine was turned off, he was left. Now, this in itself is always a matter of concern. A number of persons have found that it was possible for them to develop a third career, or at least a second successful one. There are many persons in their 60s who have suddenly found themselves fulfilling many of the interests and attitudes of earlier life, things that were frustrated or not possible. Many have formed new business projects of their own, have taken up or completed educational practices and policies. They have learned how to make and do various things. They have learned to simplify living so that having a smaller overhead and a smaller establishment, they are able to have more time to do the things they want to do. Then comes the question, what do they want to do? The answer to that very largely rests with earlier thinking. It's very hard to take that up all by itself at the end. it is much better for the individual to have carried along with his business career some other activity. The businessman and the housewife should have other interests that they have been developing over a period of years, so that the transition from one focal point of activity to another is comparatively slight. If there's no such an adjustment possible, a bewilderment settles in, and in this bewilderment all kinds of false values take over, and the person gradually falls into one form of depression or mental chaos or another because of the lack of focal point. That a person should reach retirement age without a mind sufficiently disciplined to carry him from that point on seems difficult to believe, but it is very, very common. So that the undisciplined retiree falls into small purposes that have no real significance and no actual satisfaction for himself. Here, hobbies can be important, especially if these hobbies have basic educational value. Various projects involving social activity in teaching and in working with people, all these things can develop into useful extroversions. But most of all, if the person retiring at 65 or 70 has no interest in life, it is an indictment of his previous living, and it is also a hazard to his survival. A proper planned life after retirement from business can add 10 or 15 healthy years to the life of the person, and can give them an opportunity for mental and emotional maturity that they were deprived of during the long years of business involvements. So here are two periods in which it's very necessary to take over the problems of living and try to plan a successful long-range career. This is something that I think more or less reaches the summation of the situation, and that is the long-range plan for living. Not that the person is to live from now to the next vacation, not that the person shall live from now until he buys a new car, but a long-range plan based upon a life of expectancy that for us here in the Western world will extend probably to nearly 80 years, and sometimes more, a period of time in which a long-range plan worked on diligently from the beginning and forever in the back of the mind. This is very important. It is this long-range plan, for instance, that comes into the front of the mind when we sit quietly and do not think about transitory things. The long-range plan is something that should be filled with hope, filled with resolution, filled with dedications to various useful, constructive, and unselfish activities. But the plan should be there. And if necessary, when the person graduates from high school, he should begin to think about that plan. He should view it as a basic of his life, that he is a person, is living. He is going to accept the responsibilities of life. He is going to fulfill his responsibilities and his duties. But he is also going to be ever mindful that there is a reason for his existence beyond economics, beyond promotion in office or something of this nature. That there is a reason, and that is that he shall grow, that he shall finish this life a greater person inside himself than he was when he started. This is not a growth of ego satisfaction. This is not the fulfillment of ambition. This is not self-centeredness, but it is a fulfillment of what humanity is assumed to be here for. And that is to grow, to help, to be friendly, to be serviceable, and to be modest in requirements and attitudes.